সুচরিতাকে আমি দেখেছি, শবনমকে দেখেছি। দেবপর্ণা তুই আছিস?
সুচরিতা তো হাসছে সুইট সুইট, আমার হাসতে বরাবর।
দেবপর্ণা এসে গেছিস?
হ্যাঁ 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 আছি।
ব্যাস ব্যাস, ঠিক আছে। আয়ুষী?
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম।
রেডি?
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম।
হ্যাঁ, অহনা এসে গেছে তো?
ইয়েস ম্যাম।
ব্যাস ব্যাস, ঠিক আছে।
শুনতে পাচ্ছিস তো আমার কথা?
So ma'am, should I start?
হ্যাঁ বলো।
হ্যাঁ বলছি যে যে তিনজন মানে স্পিকার না, ওরা একটু স্ক্রিন শেয়ার করে একবার দেখে নিতে পারে। আমি পোস্ট করে দিয়েছি সবাইকে, তারপরে শুরু করলে।
স্ক্রিন শেয়ার করে কি বলছো?
ওরা স্ক্রিন শেয়ার করতে পারছে কিনা আবার দেখে নিতে বললেন।
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ, একদম একদম, একটু চেক করে নিতে পারিস তোরা। সুচরিতা, দেববর্ণা, শবনম একটু দেখে নে স্ক্রিন শেয়ারটা করা যাচ্ছে কিনা।
হ্যাঁ আমার তো করা যাচ্ছে, কোনো অসুবিধা হচ্ছে না। আমার হচ্ছে না, হোস্ট ডিসেবল পার্টিসিপেন্ট স্ক্রিন শেয়ারিং দেখাচ্ছে।
আমার থেকে হচ্ছে, আমি পারছি।
শবনম আর দেবপর্ণাটা হচ্ছে না বলছে।
না ম্যাম, আমি পারছি।
দেবপর্ণাটাই শুধু হচ্ছে না বলছে।
ম্যাম দেবপর্ণা ম্যাম কোহোস্ট নন এখনো, তো ওনাকে
ও
কোহোস্ট
শতরূপাধি, তাহলে দেবপর্ণাকে কোহোস্ট করে দিলেই হয়ে যাবে।
দেবপর্ণা, হ্যাঁ এবারে দেখে নাও তো।
Okay ma'am, so should I start?
হ্যাঁ শুরু কর।
Okay. A very good afternoon to all of you. I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. I'm Ayushi Ghosh and I'm a final year postgraduate student of Bethune College, and I'm honored to be your host for the day. Joining me would be Ohana Datta. She's a final year undergraduate student of Bethune College as a co-host. So today we are presenting on psychology and higher education scope in Indian institution. But before we start, I would like to mention just a little housekeeping. One, if you have any questions during the presentation, please type it in the chat box of your Zoom control panel. I will bring them up at the end of all the 3 presentations. Okay. And number 2 is please turn your microphone and video off during the program to avoid any technical glitch. Okay. So to begin with, we are pleased to have Dr. Nilanjana Bagchi, head of the psychology department of Bethune College, to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, Envy ma'am.
Am I audible
Yes ma'am.
and visible? I don't think so.
মঞ্জিমা?
Little bit of problem with the webcam. Anyway,
I've given the spotlight video.
Thank you, Ayushi. A very good afternoon to all of you present here. On behalf of the Department of Psychology, Bethune College, I welcome you all to today's webinar, Psychology and Higher Education, Scope in Indian Institutions, that has been organized by the Department of Psychology in collaboration with Career Counseling Cell, Bethune College. As teachers who have been in this profession for over a decade now, it brings us no small amount of joy to see our students flourish in their lives. Our biggest pride is to say that we have taught them for a very few formative years in their careers, and that we wish every single student every joy and success that the world can offer. Some students definitely leave an indelible impression in the minds of teachers. Sucharita Majhi, Shabnam Basu and Devaporna Mukherjee are definitely some of them. It is my sheer pleasure to listen to them speaking in today's webinar from the other side of the table. I'm extremely thankful to them for agreeing to speak in today's webinar, and I heartily welcome all my three esteemed speakers. We are eagerly waiting to listen to you, Sucharita, Shabnam, and Devaporna. So without much delay, I request you to deliver your lecture. Thank you. Once again, I welcome everyone.
Thank you so much, Amy ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.
Now I would request Dr. Shatarupa Bandyopadhyay, convener of Career Counseling Cell of Bethune College, to say a few words. Ma'am, your mic is mute.
আয়ুষী,
Ma'am, we can't hear you.
আয়ুষী
হ্যাঁ,
একটু মানে মিমিক্রি দিয়ে বোঝানোর চেষ্টা কর যে কানে কিছু শুনতে পাচ্ছিস না। শতরূপাদি বুঝতেই পারছে না।
ম্যাম শুনতে পাচ্ছি না।
এখন শোনা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম।
আচ্ছা, thank you for inviting me in your in this occasion, and I'm very happy to find out that it was a decision taken in the career counseling cell meeting that since this year we cannot organize big seminars and webinars because of our technological challenges. So we would go departmental, and since career counseling cell has members from each and every department, so our departmental members, they had been given the responsibility of contacting the department and organizing the seminars. And I must say I have been in all the webinars conducted by various departments, and I must say that these webinars are much more successful and fruitful than our previous webinars because they are subject oriented, and students can be benefited immensely from these webinars. And I personally congratulate Mohua for organizing all these and acting as a representative of career counseling cell, negotiating with the department and make this possible. And I'm very happy that the Department of Psychology has become the first department to hold the second webinar of the series, the only department by now. And without wasting much time, I would rest here, and I would move over the microphone to the host of the event. Over to Monjima.
Thank you, Esme ma'am. Now we will turn the time over to our first speaker of the day, and I would request Ohana to introduce our respected speaker, Dr. Sucharita Mukherjee. Over to you, Ohana.
Thank you. A very good afternoon to everyone present here. I am Ohana Dotto, currently a final year UG student. A very warm welcome, ma'am. Before Sucharita ma'am begins with her presentation, I would like to give a brief introduction about her. Dr. Sucharita Mukherjee is currently working as an assistant professor at the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Indian Institute of Technology, Dhanbad. She has received her doctoral degree from the Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur. She completed her BA degree from our very own Bethune College, University of Calcutta, and her MA degree from Banaras Hindu University. Dr. Sucharita's research interest lies in three major areas: gender in social psychiatry, gender in STEM, and gender in organization. She is a recipient of Ajoy Kumar Bardhan Memorial Prize, Ila Chatterjee and Vibhuti Bhushan Chatterjee Medals, Banaras University Gold Medal, M.M. Sinha Memorial Endowment Scholarship, and University Grant Commission Junior Research Fellowship. She has published in many high-impact international journals like International Journal of Social Psychiatry, Journal of Community and Applied Social Psychology, and the Qualitative Report. Her work on imposter phenomenon received the Madnawad Best Paper Award in 2019 from the Society of Industrial and Organizational Psychology, India. She has also been selected as one of the emerging psychologists by the 32nd International Congress of Psychology. She worked as an ad hoc reviewer with 4 international journals, including Group Processes and Intergroup Relations. Dr. Sucharita's work has also been published on mass media platforms like Feminism in India and The Pioneer. Today, in the talk titled The Qualitative Research in Psychology, State of Art and Future, ma'am will focus on the scopes and possibilities of qualitative research in the context of Indian institution. We are really looking forward to the presentation. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Okay. Let me share my screen. Yeah, my screen is visible.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So before I begin, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the Department of Psychology, Bethune College, because I do believe that whatever we are doing today, whatever contributions that we are making today to society, to academics, or to the people in our lives in general, that is because of the teaching and the training that we have received from Bethune College, especially in our department. Okay. Last year when I was having this conversation regarding this interactive session with MC ma'am, I was really excited, and I'm even more excited today because this is happening. It would have been better if I could make it, it would have been a physical meeting rather than this one. But yeah, this is also fine as well. I'm really happy, honored. It feels like homecoming for me. But let me tell you, the overpowering emotion today is nervousness. Because whenever it comes to the Department of Psychology, Bethune College, the work culture is so sincere, so serious, and so disciplined that I know that this is one place where I cannot really afford to mess up. Okay. So when I was kind of deciding on the topic of my talk, I was confused between whether I should be talking about the specific research questions that I have been addressing in the last few years, or I should be talking about the area of my research. As you mentioned that I work in the area of gender psychology, and I work in 3 major branches of gender psychology: gender in social psychiatry, gender in STEM, and gender in organization. To be honest, this is also a very new area, and maybe some other days I will give another lecture on this. But I thought, considering the topic of today's webinar, it would be useful if I can give you a brief exposure to the research methodology that I use in my own research, because I do believe that maybe some of you want to pursue research or doctorate in future. So for them, it is important to get an exposure to the qualitative research as well. Okay, so that is the main idea. I promise that I will try to be as brief and as non-boring as possible, but I cannot really promise because some of the people, they find methodology quite dry. So let's hope for the best. Moving to my first slide. I'm sure that this slide is going to make some of us quite nostalgic because it has 3 of our favorite books: Morgan and King, Robert Barron, and Sister Lillian White. Among the undergraduate students, there used to be 3 fan clubs. There are a lot of debate about which one is the best psychology, introductory psychology book. I'm a big fan of Barron, to be honest, but no matter how different they are in their approaches to deal with psychology, there is one basic theme. They always begin with a discussion around why psychology should be called a science. Even if you look at other general psychology books, even there are other social psychology, organizational psychology books, you will see that in the introductory chapter, especially the first and second module, there will always be a discussion around why psychology should be considered a science. Here I have collected some snippets from the books. Okay, so psychology is a science because psychology is systematic. We use standardized measurements to do research in psychology. Psychology attempts to be accurate and objective while describing, understanding, predicting, and controlling human behavior, right? And we psychologists, we are skeptical, we are critical, and we are open-minded. Therefore, psychology is definitely a science. My talk is not about whether psychology is a science or not. Rather, I want to focus on how to do scientific research in psychology. So, whenever we conduct any research, we have three basic questions. And these three basic questions leads to a paradigmatic standpoint of the researcher. Okay, I will talk about paradigm later. What are these three basic questions that we ask as a researcher? The first question is related to ontology. What is ontology? Fancy term, ontology, right? This is related to what is the nature of reality. So do we think that the nature that the reality is singular, that the reality is out there? Or do we think that there are multiple realities existing at the same time? Or realities change over time? Do we believe in that? So if we look at natural sciences research, then most of the theorists, most of the researchers, they believe that reality is out there and reality is single. Either today or some other days, we will be able to reach at that singular reality. But in social sciences, especially in psychology, the reality is multi-layered. The reality is multiple. For instance, if we talk about our current scenario, the COVID situation, okay, that we all are talking about all the time. So can we really come up with an universal theory about the experience of COVID in human race? Is it possible to do that? Because the experience is quite different for a person who can afford to buy a ticket to Malaysia or safer countries. It is quite different from a person who has been walking for weeks and months to reach at their hometown, right? So in social sciences, especially in psychology, there is not only an interaction between the environment and the organism, but also there is a context of that organism. The context might be social, economical, political, and so on. Okay. What is the next question that we ask as a researcher? It is related to epistemology. Epistemological question asks, what is the relationship between the researcher and that being researched? What is the relationship between the knowledge and the knower? So, in the process of research, am I also becoming a part of it? Or am I just objective observer of the reality? Now, if a woman is conducting a chemical reaction or research in laboratory, the reaction between two chemical compositions is not at all dependent on or not at all affected by whether the researcher is having a cruel breakup on that particular day. But this is not the case when it comes to social sciences. For instance, if I am working to understand the healing processes of a rape victim, and as a researcher, maybe I have also faced several experiences of molestations, sexual harassments in workplace, and many others gender-based violence. And also, it is possible that I have also gone through some healing process. Maybe I have lost my parent, lost my spouse in that process. So when I have experienced the processes of healing and also gender-based violence, my interpretation of the findings that I am deriving from the study will definitely be impacted by my experiences. Therefore, in social sciences, the epistemological standpoint is often subjective. And the third question is methodology. Methodology is about what is the process of research. What do I do? Do I do experiment? Am I going to conduct a survey, in-depth interview, focus group discussion? What am I going to do to reach at the reality? That is about the methodology. So, sorry. So once I have decided on these three basic questions, then I have a successful paradigmatic standpoint. All the researchers, they must have a paradigmatic standpoint before they start doing research. Because paradigms are the basic belief systems based on the ontological, epistemological, and methodological assumptions that guides the action of the researcher. Now, in this definition, I want to talk about what is so basic about paradigms. Paradigms are basic because they are assumptions, because no matter how well argued they are, there is no way to test the assumptions. Remember, we used to do statistics and we always, sometimes we assume that the distribution is normal, there is homoscedasticity and so on. Is it really possible to test all the individuals of a population and actually test if the distribution is normal or not? There are mathematical equations or mathematical programs through which we can do it, but actually we cannot really test it. Similarly, there is no way to test what is the true nature of reality, whether it is singular or it is multiple. Thomas Kuhn, incommensurability. What is incommensurability? It means that it means there is no objective standard through which we can actually judge which paradigm is better than the other. Although the word paradigm is more common in literature, but some of the theorists like Creswell has termed this phenomena as philosophical worldview. Every researcher should have a philosophical worldview. How do we develop this philosophical worldview? Supervisor or the institution that I work in, it might come from several sources. Okay, so what are the major paradigms in research? In most of the canonical texts, we see positivism, post-positivism, critical theory, and constructivism. Although in psychological research, we mostly consider post-positivism and constructivism. But I will talk about all of them a little bit. The first is positivism. In positivism, we believe that the reality is out there. Whether we are measuring the reality or not, it will exist independent of the existence of the researcher. So, regardless of whether a researcher is going to laboratory and doing some mathematical equations about gravitational force or not, the gravitational force will behave in its own way, right? So there is a dualism. There is an independent existence between the knowledge and the knower. Therefore, the epistemological standpoint among the positivists is completely dualist. In methodology, they use experimental methods because they want to understand the causality, how X is affecting Y in a completely controlled situation. Okay, so suppose they want to see the effect of temperature in how a particular gas behaves. Maybe they will control other factors like pressure and volume and so on, because they want to see the causation. Okay. However, in social science research, it is not possible to be completely objective. Therefore, social scientists and most of the psychological researchers, they believe in post-positivism. Post-positivism is very similar to positivism, except the fact that we have a critical realism. We believe that reality is singular, reality is out there, but because of our own limitations, the limitations of the researchers, the values and biases of the researchers, as well as the limitation of the measuring instruments, we can only trace reality probabilistically. So remember, whenever we conclude research, then we often say we use confidence interval or p-values, because we want to come to a conclusion that in 95% of the cases or 99% of the cases, this hypothesis is either rejected or accepted. So basically, we are not sure. There is always some portion, some percentage, which is considered as some sort of error. Therefore, the findings that we derive, they are only probably true. In terms of methodology, therefore, most of the times we use falsification of hypothesis. I will talk about falsification of hypothesis in greater detail in my coming slides. Third is critical theory. So in positivism and post-positivism, the position of the researcher is more like a disinterested scientist. But in critical theory, they take a position of a thinking intellectual or an activist. Critical theory is not much used in psychological research, but they believe in an ontological standpoint, which is based on historical realism. What is historical realism? Critical theorists believe that whatever we consider today as reality is a result of some historical processes that involve social, economic, political, gender values, ethnic, and all other factors. You take any phenomenon, you take gender values today, you take homosexuality, you take the concept of rape, you take anything, everything is a product of a historical process. Therefore, the epistemological standpoint of critical theories is quite subjective. And they do not only conduct research for the sake of gaining knowledge, rather, they also believe in emancipation and they want to make some changes to their work. The last paradigm is constructivism. Constructivists believe that reality is multiple. They believe that reality is mostly socially constructed, and with time it might or might not change. However, they want to focus on re-socialization or sometimes changing the constructed reality. Okay. In terms of the epistemological standpoint, there is a transaction. It is completely subjectivist. They believe that it is impossible that the knowledge is independent of the knower. The knower cannot really separate himself or herself from the research process. Therefore, the values will definitely interfere or confound or contaminate or impact the findings that we derive. Okay. Now, some of the times there is a question regarding, okay, then if your values are impacting your research, then most of the purists, they kind of freak out. How is it possible to derive at something? Now, there is a process that we qualitative researchers often rely on that is known as reflexivity. That is a process of self-monitoring of the researcher. Although we accept the fact that our values, our experiences are likely to impact the findings, we have to self-monitor. We have to look inside the processes that might be impacting the data collection as well as the interpretation process. In constructivism, we mostly focus on qualitative research because we believe in hermeneutical standpoint. There is a dialogue between the knowledge and the knower. And there is a dialogue between the researcher and the participant, and both of them, they co-construct the reality in order to reach at a conclusion. Okay. Coming to the critiques of received view or conventional wisdom. Again, fancy terminology. They are not my terms. Received view and conventional wisdom, both of them are terms used by Guba and Lincoln. And if you guys are planning to explore this area, definitely you should read Guba and Lincoln's work. Guba and Lincoln are very critical about received view or conventional wisdom. By received view or conventional wisdom, they have meant the existing quantitative approach or perspective through which we have been conducting psychological research for all these years. The first criticism is coming from context stripping. Okay, so remember when we used to do any psychological research, we used to do a lot of control. We used to control a lot of variables which we considered as extraneous variables. Okay, for instance, if I'm conducting a research to understand the effect of math anxiety on math performance, then maybe I will conduct the research on individuals who have some level of IQ, who are going to the same type of schools. But in reality, does it happen in that way? Students go to different types of schools taught by different types of teachers having different types of academic, educational background, different types of teaching styles, and so on. That is a reality. That is a real world that we must tap. We must try to understand. Therefore, whenever we come to a conclusion from a very controlled situation, we should conclude that, okay, math anxiety impacts math performance when the IQ level is this, when the students go to this type of schools, or when they are taught by this type of teachers using this type of strategy, and so on. But it is not really possible. So whenever we are conducting quantitative research or conventional research in psychology, we're kind of stripping out, we're kind of taking away the context from the research. Okay. Therefore, there is a serious question regarding whether we can actually generalize the findings that we derive from this kind of research. The second is exclusion of meaning. Now, in quantitative research, okay, I will give an example from my current project. So currently, I have been working on a project to understand the workplace experience of LGBTQ individuals in the corporates of India. Okay, so there might be two ways to go about it. What I can do is I can look at the literature, I can see what are the relevant variables, and I can simply give them some questionnaires, maybe a questionnaire of discrimination or gender stigma consciousness and so on. And there is another way. Through qualitative research, I can simply go to them, talk to them. I can conduct institutional ethnography. I can see the gender symbols existing in the organization. I can conduct in-depth interviews and so on. So in my project, I am conducting in-depth interviews. Okay. So whenever there is a survey, how does it happen? There are 10-20 questions. Suppose I'm conducting a survey on discrimination among LGBTQ individuals. Okay. So there are 10 to 20 questions, and but do you think that those 10 to 20 questions can actually cover the entire way people in the entire world can understand the meaning of discrimination? In one of my interviews with a lesbian woman, I was talking to her. I had a 40-45 minutes of conversation with her, and I was trying to understand if she has faced any discrimination in terms of recruitment, promotion, wage benefits, and so on. She mostly said no, because there are strict non-discrimination policies in her department. Okay, then I was almost about to end the interview, and then she is like, there is something which is off, which I feel sad about at times. So recently there was a marriage ceremony of one of the colleagues, and she invited everyone except me. Now you tell me, is there any survey form, is there any questionnaire which can include this particular meaning or understanding or experience of discrimination? Is it possible to do that? Is it possible to tap all the types of marginalization, victimization, outgroup, exclusion through 10 to 20 items? Is it possible to do that? It's not. Therefore, somewhere or the other, the conventional wisdom also ignores the meaning and the context. They are somewhere or the other missing in this kind of research. The third is disjunction of grand theories with local context. Ethic-emic debate. Ethic-emic debate is a very famous idea that anthropologists often use. Now, ethic is when a process is universal. It is common across the human race. And emic is about some culture-specific things. So maybe in the entire world, we have cognitive processes which are same, which are universal. Maybe we all store our information in the same way. Maybe Atkinson-Shiffrin model is universal. But there are several differences across cultures in other behaviors. I will give you an example. So WHO in, I think, 1983, they found that they tried to understand the symptoms of depression across the cultures, and they conducted study in Iran, Switzerland, Canada, and China. Japan. So what they found was a lot of somatization, somatic symptoms are evident in Chinese culture, because in cultures where mental health is more stigmatized, there is a tendency of somatization. So this kind of disjunction might be there. Most of the grand theories that we use today in psychology, if you look at them, they are developed in Western cultures. If you look at the samples, most of them are white undergraduate students, psychology students, in fact. So can we really generalize all these theories which are developed in a completely different culture, with completely different kind of societies, with different kind of gender values, different kind of ideologies, to our context, to local context? Maybe there are, if you look at India, then there are many spiritual healing systems that maybe biomedical model, they simply ignore them, right? So there is a disjunction between these grand theories and our local context. You can read about Kleinman's work and the work of Sudhir Kakkar if you really want to understand about this local versus global global division, especially in terms of clinical psychology, clinical disorders. Okay. The next point is inapplicability of theory to individual cases. The problem with quantitative method is that if you tell me that in 90% of the cases, this is not a real percentage, by the way, but if you tell me, for instance, that in 90% of the cases, LGBTQ individuals, they experience discrimination in the workplace. Okay, that does not mean that whoever I will face tomorrow, an LGBTQ person, he or she is going through some sort of discrimination in his or her workplace. In fact, I conducted 20 to 21 interviews, but 3 or 4 of them, they have come up with narrative that they have extremely supportive parents, extremely inclusive workplace, and they're like really happy with their life. They have never faced any sort of discrimination. So there will always be some percentage of people who are not falling under that broad category, and their stories are equally, they have equal rights to be represented in the literature. So yeah, somewhere or the other, when we are conducting qualitative analysis, we are focusing on those individual stories, and these stories are also important. We also call them alternative stories. They are also needed to be told. And the last point is exclusion of discovery dimension. Okay, so whenever we are conducting quantitative research, we're trying to inquire whether our hypothesis is true or false, rather than we're trying to discover a completely new area. Discovery happens when we go to a field without any knowledge about what we are going to search for. Okay, when we take an inductive approach or qualitative approach, we simply go to the field. For instance, when I started my work, I simply wanted to understand the workplace experience. There is a broad area rather than some hypothesis. So qualitative research provides us with better scope to discover, to build a new area of research or come up with something new. And this leads us to this debate: theory or observation, what comes first? So in most of the research, what we do is we have a hypothesis in our mind and we follow a falsification approach, or maybe we don't do it. The concept of falsification was first given by an Austrian British philosopher, Karl Popper. Karl Popper was a very radical person. He said that there should be a very strict distinction between what is science and what is not. Okay, what is science and what is pseudoscience, what is science and what is non-science. Okay, so he has come up with a very radical theory. He says that a theory is scientific only when it is falsifiable, till the time it is falsified by another, even a single researcher. He has come up with this example, a very classic example of all swans are white. This theory is true till the time we come up with observe a single black swan. Karl Popper was radical enough to say that a single contradictory observation is good enough to discard an existing grand theory. Now, although this approach is quite radical and it has got a lot of appreciation from the philosophers, but there are a lot of criticisms. First is, do we really discard grand theories if we find a contradictory findings? Do we really do that? What we often do is, whenever a finding is contradictory to the existing grand theories, we question our own methodology. We question our own sample size. We think that maybe we have done something wrong. Okay. More importantly, if we find something contradictory to grand theories, it is often very difficult to publish those results. Therefore, there might be a huge account of research which are contradictory to our existing theories, but they're never published. We don't get to know them. That is why Karl Popper himself, in an interview with Scientific American, he said that scientists are not as self-critical as they should be. They should always be trying to falsify their own and others' theories. But do we really do it? For instance, when we develop our hypothesis, We have one null hypothesis and one alternative hypothesis, right? Most of the time what we try is we want from our inside that the alternative hypothesis should be proven to be true. When we develop the hypothesis, we have an idea that this is based on the literature or based on our own intuition. We have an idea about this is the way these two variables should be related to each other. And we oftentimes we want to confirm those hypotheses rather than falsify them. Therefore, this approach of Karl Popper, no matter how good it sounds, it is oftentimes not quite practical. Most of the theories suggest that Karl Popper's approach is more about what scientists should do rather than what they do in their real life. Also, another problem is that he said that a theory is scientific only when it is falsifiable. But many philosophers find that most of the mathematical things, they cannot be experimentally falsifiable. In that sense, mathematics, following Karl Popper's definition, is not a science at all. Karl Popper's main position was to attack at inductive methodology. By inductive method, we mean that we go to the field, we are open about the observation, and from the observation, we develop a theory, rather than having a theory in my mind or having a hypothesis in my mind and testing it. Okay. Thomas Kuhn was one of the major critics of Karl Popper. Thomas Kuhn was a physicist, but later he developed interest in philosophy of science. Thank God he did it, because he came up with one of the most revolutionary concept, a revolutionary book, The Structure of Scientific Revolutions. According to Thomas Kuhn, every science goes through 4 main phases. Okay, the first is pre-paradigmatic phase. So suppose I want to start a new branch. Suppose I want to start a new sort of science, new sort of discipline. Then in the beginning, I don't have any idea about what is my paradigms, what is my theoretical standpoint, what is my standard. So I have to at first figure out.
Screen नामागे भी वैसा ही होता.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Please continue.
Okay. Okay. So in the pre-paradigmatic phase, there is no clear standards about the paradigms. Okay. Then comes the normal science. So all of the sciences right now, they are normal science because they have well-functioning paradigm. But a well-functioning paradigm does not mean that there are no anomalies. There are some research questions which might not be dealt with the existing paradigm all the time. Okay. So there might be some of the research questions in psychology which cannot be successfully dealt with the existing paradigm of post-positivism, maybe. Okay, but normal science exists when these number of anomalies are not many, and the researchers still have some sort of faith that in some time or the other they will be able to address those anomalies or those research questions using the existing research paradigm. Okay. Then comes a point which is known as crisis. Crisis means the number of anomalies, number of research questions which are successfully, which cannot be successfully dealt with the existing paradigm, they increases. And somewhere or the other, the researchers, they are losing faith, losing hope that they can actually address these questions using the existing paradigm. And there comes the point of paradigmatic shift, when there is a need to change our philosophical standpoint, our position. I will request all of you to look at your own research question and look at critically whether the existing conventional wisdom or quantitative approach or post-positivism, it can successfully address your research question. If it does not, then it is high time that you shift to a different paradigm. Okay. Coming to the understanding of qualitative research. Okay. Funnily enough, I could not find any good, definition of qualitative research in all of these books. They have come up with, they have defined qualitative research as something which is not quantitative. So I thought that maybe it will be good to understand qualitative research through its characteristics. Now, not all of these characteristics are applicable for all of the researchers, but yes, we use natural setting rather than lab or controlled situation. We do not use fancy instrument except recorder for sometimes. The researcher is the key instrument. We use multiple sources of information. For instance, we focus on silences, we focus on body postures, gestures, we observe the context and so on. Mostly we use an inductive data analysis. Inductive data analysis means, as I already talked about it, that we go to the field without any hypothesis in our mind, but we may have some theoretical lens in our mind, but that should not impact the way we are observing, the way we are collecting data in the field. Okay, and then obviously it provides us with an interpretive and holistic account. It is more holistic than quantitative research because it involves meaning and context. There are a whole lot of classifications of qualitative research. In phenomenological approach, we focus on the experience of a particular phenomena across individuals. I saw, there are very few psychological work who have used phenomenological approach. There should be many. I can suggest you the work of Ernesto Noronha and Premilia de Cruz ma'am. They have worked exhaustively to understand several organizational behaviors. Mostly they have worked on the workplace bullying in Indian call centers. So that is also the concept of the phenomena of dignity. They have worked on that. So maybe you can follow that research. Second is grounded theory approach. This is the most widely used qualitative approach in psychology. Here what we do is, again, the idea is to develop a theory. That is why it is known as grounded theory. The idea is to go to field with open-mindedness, to look at the patterns of behaviors, and based on those patterns, we want to come up to a theory. Okay. The third is narrative approach. There we can use biographies, autobiographies, life story interviews in order to understand certain behaviors or experiences. The fourth is ethnography approach. Ethnography approach is mostly used by sociologists and anthropologists. What they do is they go to a different culture and then they stay with them, and then they try to understand the behavioral patterns and lifestyle of that community. Now, ethnography approach can also be used successfully in organizational research, especially if you want to understand how the organizational processes, they are gendered in nature. Then maybe you can do an institutional ethnography. You can simply join an organization. You can stay there for 6 months or 1 year. You can observe and you can collect data. Okay. The fifth one is case study approach, when we focus on individual cases in detail, in-depth manner. Okay. So these are the main approaches of qualitative research. I'm not going in detail about this research, but this is just a very brief understanding of what are all the things, all the classes of qualitative research happening now. This is the graph that I have collected from Ingram, and as you can see, between 1930 to 2019, there is an upward direction of qualitative research in psychology, especially a number of journals, international journals, they have been focusing solely on qualitative research in psychology, understanding the importance of qualitative research in this domain. In terms of the major institutions in India who have been promoting qualitative research, who have been working in this area, let me tell you in the beginning that these are not the only institutions that we have, but I am aware of the work of these institutions, so I can suggest you names of some professors that you may read their work and contact them if you want to. First is Indian Institute of Technology, Kanpur, that is also my institution, and then there Professor Kumar Ravi Priya and Professor Shikha Dikshit, they have been working exhaustively in qualitative research. Professor Kumar Ravi Priya has also written exhaustively, about this methodology. So you might also want to read his work to get an idea about it. Second is Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad. I already mentioned the work of Premilia de Cruz ma'am and Ernest and Oren Hassar. They have worked exhaustively. They mostly work, I would say, in an interdisciplinary manner. They consider sociology, organizational behavior. They kind of combine them, and it would be interesting if you are planning to do some interdisciplinary work in the area of organizational behavior. Okay. Third is Indian Institute of Technology, Hyderabad. In Hyderabad, Shubha Ranganathan ma'am is there. She is working in the area of healing processes in the context of India. And she has quite some papers that critically look at the existing biomedical model. So you might also want to read her work. Sorry. In Indian Institute of Technology, Dhanbad, I work in qualitative methods, also in mixed method, Professor Deepika Sharma, ability studies, and so on. In Delhi University, out of scholars who have been presenting their work in conferences based on qualitative research. So I'm sure that there are some professors who have been working in qualitative research. In Tata Institute of Social Sciences, I was recently reading the work of Sasmita Balu ma'am, and she is in the management department but she has worked exhaustively to understand the diversity and inclusion, especially when it comes to LGBTQ community, and her work is also qualitative in nature. So these are the institutions and these are the people you may want to read their work and approach them if you want to do a PhD or future research with them. Okay. These are the main journals that are there. So my suggestion would be, if you're planning to do a research in qualitative area, if you're planning to address a research question that is new and there are not many literature in that area and you want to explore that area, in that case you can go to you can use qualitative research. If you're dealing with populations which are marginalized and you believe in critical theory or action research, then also you can consider doing qualitative research. Even if you don't want to include qualitative research immediately as a part of your project, then also I'll suggest all of you to read about qualitative research, because once you get aware of the other paradigms, the other philosophical orientations in research in general, you have a better idea about your own research paradigmatic standpoint. So yes, thank you, and be critical.
Thank you so much, Sucharita ma'am. I would request Ohana to introduce our second, Devaporna Mukherjee.
Hello again. Thank you, Sucharita ma'am, for such a wonderful presentation. We'll surely keep everything in mind, and I hope that there will be questions for the interactive session at the end of the webinar. So hello again. Now I would like to introduce Devaporna Mukherjee ma'am. We are glad to have you, as you are one of the ex-students of Bethune as well. Ms. Devaporna Mukherjee is currently pursuing her PhD in psychology from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, IIT Kanpur. Her interests lie around application-based interdisciplinary research, primarily focusing on cognitive ergonomics and human factors. She is currently trying to figure out how cognitive factors like working memory and attention contribute to specialized skills like driving. Today, in her talk titled Application-Based Psychology, Prospects in India, ma'am will primarily focus on the interdisciplinary nature of the subject. The talk will also provide an overview of the discipline of cognitive science, its scope, application process, and current directions of research. We are looking forward to your presentation. Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah, can you see the screen?
Yes, ma'am, it's visible.
Yeah. So hello, everybody. Uh, so today I'll talk about application-based psychology and its prospect in India. So Sucharita right now just very eloquently talked about qualitative research. But this talk is drastically different, but it starts with the quote of Karl Popper. So after her speech, obviously no introduction required. So Karl Popper said that we are students of a problem and not discipline. So any relevant science starts with a problem. So all of us are actually trained in specific disciplines. For example, we are trained in psychology. So we have a set of skills. Someone who is trained in neuroscience, in computer science, etc., they have different sets of skills. But we all try to solve a problem. So basically, every science starts with a problem. And from there, I'll try to talk about the interdisciplinary approaches of psychology. So let's start with a problem. Now, what is mind? The primary problem in addressing mind is its abstract nature. So mind has to be defined without a material reference. And that's what makes it so confusing. So how is psychology, students of psychology, trying to approach this problem? So we use behavioral measures to understand the operation of mind. So in cognitive psychology, what we do is that so obviously you guys have read about behavioral school of psychology. So there's this stimulus and a response. And what cognitive psychologists say is that there's a black box in between. So what we try to do is we try to give a stimulus and we try to see the response that is being elicited by that stimulus. But this response is actually a function of the organism and the different situations. And what's happening? So why is the response of a same stimulus vary from one person to another? Depends on what happens in the black box. So the approach that psychology takes is that we try to observe the behavior and we try to deduce what's happening in the black box. So that's the psychological approach. What does philosophers do? So whether machines can simulate human cognitions, have experiences like those of humans. For example, if we talk about AI, as of now, they can somewhat simulate some of the human experiences, cognitive experiences, but do they actually experience the way we do? For example, if we refer to John Searle's thought experiment of Chinese room. So this experiment was, it's a thought experiment where a person, for example, you are stuck in a room in China, okay? You don't know anything about their language. You find a box there and a manual. So in the box, you find Chinese characters, and in the manual, you see that if Chinese character A appears, then from the box, the answer will be Chinese character C, D, and E. And if Chinese character B appears, the answer can be X, Y, and Z. So someone from outside the door sips in one character, okay? So from under the door. So you take up that, and so for example, they just send character A. So what you are doing is so from the manual, you were seeing that the answer of character A will be character B, C, and D, or D. So you from under the door, you send character B. So what happens is the person outside the door who understands the Chinese language, they can experience what you are saying. They can understand what you are saying. You are not understanding anything, but you are actually communicating with that person. So what happens is at times when we talk about artificial intelligence and all and intelligent devices, what they do is they can simulate human cognitions, but we really don't know whether they can experience it. They can communicate with you very nicely, but you think that they're communicating, but they're communicating without understanding the meaning. So that is how philosophy's contribution. So what anthropology does is there are differences in thinking across culture. So there's there are some experiences that you find across every culture. There are some experiences that are focused in different culture. So that's what is the approach of anthropology. So what computer science does, they are creating models to predict behavior. So we are so psychologists are observing behavior, but what computer scientists are doing, they're modeling these observations and trying to predict future behavior. They're also trying to duplicate intelligent behaviors in devices, the concept of machine learning and AI. So what linguistics does, so when we are talking about mind, such an abstract concept, so for that we need language. So without language, let alone solving the problem of what is mind, we can't even have the concept of mind without language. So linguistics is very integral to any problem. So what neuroscience does, neuroscience is the study of, so neuroscience, a single nerve cell reacts to a situation, or even large areas of brain reacts to a situation. We often use methods of neuroscience, for example, neuroimaging in our experiments and researches. So what am I trying to say? I'm just trying to say that this question, what is mind, is approached by all these disciplines. They have different skill sets and they are trying to solve only one problem. So Miller in 2003 talked about the interconnections among the fields of cognitive science, and cognitive science is developed as an interconnection between all these fields: psychology, philosophy, linguistics, computer science, anthropology, and neuroscience. So this is what the interdisciplinary approach of psychology is. So let's talk about what is cognitive science. So officially, cognitive science is defined as the interdisciplinary study of mind and intelligence, embracing philosophy and psychology, artificial intelligence, neuroscience, linguistics, and anthropology. Researchers from different disciplines connected by a single goal often work together using the methods from a number of disciplines to study and understand the inner workings of the mind. So let's just brush up on, so obviously you all know what cognitive psychology is, but let's just brush up on it once. Cognitive psychology is the study of how humans perceive, learn, remember, and think about information. But cognitive psychology rejects the exclusive focus on what is observable behavior. This is how cognitive psychology, the cognitive school of thoughts, vary from the behaviorist school of thought. So they talk about the observable behavior, but it does not have the exclusive focus on the observable behavior. So as Chomsky implied, that understanding the mind requires us to consider what lies behind behavior, to ask what rules or processes govern the behavior we observe. So our methodologies are generally about the observable behaviors, but we always keep on asking that what is actually governing and what leads to this behavior, what's happening so that a person is reacting in this way. So so that's what cognitive psychology is. So let's talk about some applications of cognitive science. So it's widely used in too many areas now. So first, I'll talk about marketing, consumer behavior, advertisement. So it's widely used in consumer behavior and advertisement. For example, you are trying to advertise for a product, and so for that you need to, for example, you are trying to advertise a product, for example, a toothpaste, okay, for a kid. So you know how to impress a kid. What are the cognitive processes so what will impress that kid? Maybe different colors, visual effects, or maybe some superheroes that can actually attract their attention. So that is what about, so that's marketing. We also, for adults, you know, in YouTube, we have this autoplay option where they try to increase the screen time on YouTube. So they are using psychology, they're using this using psychology at subconscious level for marketing for their product for increasing screen time or for the sale of their products. So that's how they're using cognitive psychology. A very simple example. So we all use Amazon, right? So a very simple example of subliminal subliminal approach is that the A to Z. So you'll find that in the Amazon logo, there's an arrow that's pointing from A to Z. So in this website, you get everything from A to Z, and this arrow is almost like a smile. So we don't notice about it always, but that's how it affects our subconscious. So they're using the concepts from psychology, and they're using it to sell their products, to sell their brands, and to promote, to increase screen time, etc. For management training, if we really understand the way people acquire knowledge and intellectual skills and the way they perform, so we can actually tap at that points to improve their intellectual training and performance accordingly. So it's widely used in training and management. Even it's used in law. For example, there's huge research in eyewitness testimony. We have research by Loftus, where so it's eyewitness testimony. So law is based on so this legal procedures. Eyewitness testimony is very important in legal procedures. But when a person is when you see a murder happening in front of your eyes, okay, so what happens is at that point of time, you yourself are distracted, you yourself are afraid. Is it so you may already make up some part of it, you may join some lines, and after maybe a month or two, when you're, or maybe a year, when you are being when you are appearing on a court and you are just giving your eyewitness testimony, so it can actually vary greatly from the real life situation. So that's where psychology comes. So how much we can believe in this eyewitness testimony and the attention perception that, so these processes, how it can affect an eyewitness how it can affect the eyewitness. So in education, obviously teaching techniques. So if we know how people acquire knowledge, and it will obviously be easier to tap at those points and produce the content in such a way so that it's easier for people to acquire that sort of knowledge. So in clinical setting, we also due to neuroimaging and all, it's easier for us now to understand brain disorders and reflect upon the abnormal functioning of brain. It often allows us to understand very severe psychological disorders like schizophrenia and how brain works in such situations. So let's talk about psycholinguistics. The next application is in the field of psycholinguistics. So basically, psycholinguistics talks about how humans acquire, use, and understand language. And why is language so important in psychology? Because as I told previously, that to conceptualize abstract concepts like mind, we need language. We can't even, so let alone solving problems, we can't even conceptualize problems that we actually deal with in psychology. So for that, we need language, we need to communicate well, and how, so we need to talk about how people use language, how language varies from one culture to another, and why does it vary. So that's what psycholinguistics is. Then we can talk about machine learning and AI. So scientists use cognitive science to replicate intelligence in device. So what happens is we often, so we are studying psychology. We are seeing how brain works in a given situation, or how our mind works in a given situation. And we are trying to replicate this in a device. Okay, so we are feeding tons of information. So how my mind works in a given situation, how your mind works in a given situation, how n number of people's mind works in a given situation. We are feeding all of it in a database. Okay. And then, so this database has tons of information that one person does not have. It's impossible for a person to have. So this database helps in understanding humans better and help us humans make decisions. So that's how machine learning and AI is used. So what is the difference, primary difference between machine learning and AI? Machine learning is when I'm feeding one set of information, it's a smaller version, and connecting a number of areas of machine learning talks about artificial intelligence. So that's where cognitive science is broadly used now. It's also used in game designing. So, for example, of late, you will find that the new generation game designing is totally based on user experience. So if we consider maybe the games we used to play in 2000s, early 2000s, for example, Prince of Persia or Mario, and we compare that with maybe PUBG today, you will actually understand the difference in user experience across time. So how do we know that what will help us in having this user experience? So that's where psychology comes into play. Okay, so cognitive science has a lot of application in game designing and also in user interface. So the user interface of your laptops, phones, etc. We constantly use concepts of perceptual processes, attention, working memory, brain lateralization, etc. to design UI. So that's again where cognitive science plays a role. So, you know what, this emergence of cognitive science as a discipline also affected other disciplines broadly. For example, the discipline of economics. So in the last century, neoclassical economics dominated the field across. So what they tried was to predict behavior of markets while completely ignoring the cognitive processes of individuals. So it assumed that individuals behaved in ways to maximize their wealth. But that's not always true. However, recent development of field of behavioral economics acknowledges that behavior of markets is affected by the flawed decision-making processes of individuals. So, so people often are willing to pay more for something for a single thing when they are using a credit card versus when they're using cash. So that doesn't really make sense. It's a flawed decision-making process, but so that's where behavioral economics comes into play, and that's where psychology comes into play. So what are the scopes and application processes? So after your graduation or master's, what all you can do? So in higher studies of cognitive science, there's this cognitive science joint entrance examination, the CogJET. So this is held across the country around January, February. The application forms are released around December, January. So the type of the exam keeps on changing. Generally, it's MCQ. MCQ with so it's a very generally it has a standard pattern, like there are two papers, and first is the aptitude paper, and then you have this paper from your own subject, and from which covers psychology, research methods, statistics, neuroscience, and a bit of coding. So generally that's the type, but actually it keeps changing. For example, in 2020, due to the lockdown and all, what CogJET did was they sent research papers, like 2-3 research papers, to all the applicants, and they had to select one, and from there they were asked questions. So they had to read the paper, and the questions were regarding the research methods, statistics, etc., anything relevant to that paper. So it was a bit subjective in nature. There were interviews that were conducted, and thus students were selected. So after CogJET, this examination actually helps you get admission in these 5 institutions: IIT Kanpur, IIT Delhi, IIIT Hyderabad, CBCS University of CBCS. It's basically the Center for Behavioral and Cognitive Sciences, University of Allahabad, and Punjab University. So, so other than CogJET, so under the umbrella of CogJET, so these two so these two, I would say, university does not fall under the umbrella of Cogit. So we also have cognitive science in Center for Cognitive and Brain Sciences in IIT Gandhinagar. They have a different entrance examination. You get the application forms around January, the exam is around February, and the interview is around March. Acha. For Cogit, after you clear Cogit, all these institutes have an interview process. So after you cross the cutoff marks, you have cleared Cogit. If you want, you need to apply to any of this institution individually. And after that, you will have a proper interview process there. Okay. So, and we also have the Center for Neural and Cognitive Sciences under University of Hyderabad. So here in this center, they are offering courses for neuroscience and cognitive science. From a person of psychology background, I think cognitive science will be a bit more relevant. And yeah. So for PhD, generally one needs to qualify UGC NET or JRF. For IITs, there's a written test or interview after you qualify the NET or JRF. For CBCS Allahabad University, they conduct this combined research entrance test, the CRET, and the form is released around July. Exam takes place around January, and you get both subjective and objective papers here. After this, I'll just give a glimpse into an interdisciplinary research. I'll talk about what I am working right now. I'm working on interdisciplinary research as of now. So I'm actually working on locating the driver in driving, an interaction-based account of driving as a cognitive process. So, so what happens is, I'll just introduce my supervisor and co-supervisor. My supervisor is Dr. R. Verma from Cognitive Science, IIT Kanpur. My co-supervisor is Professor Nagendra Velaga from Civil Engineering Department, IIT Bombay. So basically what we are trying to do is we are locating the driver in driving. So what happens in most driving research is that people just totally ignore the drivers. So in India, most driving research is conducted by civil engineering and mechanical engineering departments. And what they try to do is they try to talk about the length and the width of the road, the angle of the road in hilly areas, or maybe the signaling, or for example, there's this central, there's this central business districts of city, and these people try to plan the road so that it reduces traffic jam. That is what the approach of driving research is now in India. So they totally ignore the role of a driver. So what I try to say is that, for example, if we just pick up the plan of the central business, of the roads and the signaling of central business district of maybe Germany, and just superimpose it on Varanasi. Okay, so what do you think? Will it actually work? Will it reduce traffic jam? Will people actually start following signals where people just don't even bother when there's a red signal appearing? So that's where driver comes in action. So what happens? What happens? Why does drivers behave in a way in one country and in one place and behaves in some other way in some other places? So there are other things also. Okay, so it's not only about the cultural differences, but about the cognitive differences also. So a research in 1966, as early as 1966, claimed that overlooking traffic signs is not an exception, but a rule. Now, why is that so? Okay, so in recent times, you obviously will know that there's a steep increase in the number of in-vehicle assistance systems. Now, what is in-vehicle assistance system? They are like the Google Maps, and so yeah, the Google Maps and the the rear view mirror so the digital rear view mirrors. Okay, so basically these systems try to improve the driving experience. They help us make driving easier, but does it actually improve driving experience? Like, is it very easy for you to drive in a high speed highway and at the same time simultaneously look at the map and and take the decision that you are going to take the next right turn or whatever? So is it that easy? So does it significantly increase cognitive load, which in turns affect driving negatively? So what happens is, so since these researchers who are developing these systems and who are developing the roads, they are totally ignoring the individual, the drivers. What they keep on ignoring is about cognitive load. So what happens at times is, when I'm driving and parallelly processing so much information, it increases my it increases my cognitive load. And as you know, the cognitive capacity of individual is there's a limited capacity. The cognitive capacity of individual is limited. So that actually affects driving negatively. So and since driving is primarily a visual task, does visual task act as a greater distractors as compared to auditory tasks while driving? So what happens is, for example, when you are driving on a high-speed highway and you are seeing the Google map, is that a greater distraction versus when Google you in an audio mode? So you are listening to that audio version and you are calculating, so you are taking the decision whether to take the right or go straight. So which one is a greater distraction, looking at them or just listening to the Google voice assistant and take a decision? So that's the question. And if looking at the map is a greater distraction, why is it so? Okay, we may also try to find out. So after all these research, we may also try to find out the optimum level of visual and auditory tasks that can be taken up while driving. So we just can't say that, okay, make all these in-vehicle assistance systems, etc. That's not possible. So this actually helps driving in some way, but we need to find the optimum level which can be taken up with driving. Okay, so there are some researches that are going on in India on cognition and driving. The effect of working memory capacity by varying working memory load across modality on driving performance. So as you know, working memory capacity is the capacity of working memory of an individual, and working memory load, this is actually a characteristic of the task that the individual is doing. So that's how working memory capacity and working memory load differs from one another. And we have driver distraction due to, so there are researches that are going on about driver distraction due to mobile phone use, how different types of distraction, for example, driving related, driving non-related, voluntary, involuntary distraction affect driving. So what are driving related and driving non-related distraction? So when we are driving, there are certain distractions. So the primary driving task is going straight or taking a path. So you have your clutch, brake and accelerator, you have your this gear and steering. So that's your primary driving task. But you have driving related distractions. For example, setting up the mirror so that you can see the vehicles that are coming from behind. Okay, so that is important. You need to do that for driving, but it is not the primary driving task and it acts as a distractor. Okay, so there are some non-driving related distractors. For example, your coffee gets spilled. Okay, so that's a non-driving related distractor. That's a distractor and that's nowhere related to your driving primary driving task. So we have voluntary and involuntary distractions also. For example, changing the radio signals. Okay, so for voluntary distraction, we can decide when I'll do it. So before changing the radio signal, I'll just check that, okay, it's safe to drive for the next 5-6 seconds. And in that time, I'll just change the radio signal. But in case of involuntary distraction, for example, if a kid starts yelling at the back seat and you suddenly just turn your head and check. So that's basically involuntary distraction. So you can't plan before such distraction. So there are certain types of distraction that should be reduced. Okay, so we are also working on this. We are also working on effect of change blindness on driving. So we often tend to miss stimulus that keeps on appearing, maybe signposts, as I told you that so it's not an exception but a rule to overlook traffic signs. So that's basically there is a change that's appearing. So there's a signboard that is appearing, but I'm confidently missing that signboard. So yeah. So I'll just talk briefly about compensatory behavior. So what is compensatory behavior? So when a person, for example, you were driving a car and someone called you. Okay, you just took the phone. You don't have a hands free. You just took the phone. You are using your left hand, so you are unable to change the gear. So what you do is you just shift to the extreme left lane and go slow. So what you are doing? So since you have a limited cognitive capacity, you are dividing your cognitive capacity to the phone call and the driving task. So you are reducing the difficulty of the driving task to compensate the given situation, right? So to measure all these, we use brake pedal force. And okay, right now I'm working on a paper that actually talks about post-error slowing. So what is post-error slowing? So when a participant, so generally what happens is participants tend to speed up until they commit an error. After they commit an error, they drastically slow down. And again, their speed starts improving after each trial. Okay, so even its real life implication is after someone commits an accident, for some days they're very, very cautious while driving. Again, they get back to their normal driving patterns. So that's what is post-error slowing. So so what is the methodology? How do I collect data? So we use this instrument, the driving simulator. It's almost like a car. We have 3 screens. For the central vision, we have the primary screen in front, and we have 2 screens on the sides. For the peripheral vision, we have a steering, clutch, brake, and accelerator, and gears. So, and the data gets recorded. So we can program the way we want. We can feed in situations. We can feed in, for example, highway scenes, city scenes, pedestrian crossing, then parked vehicles joining roads. We can produce things like intersections, so when the person, signalized crossing, unsignalized crossing, or the driver needs to go straight through an intersection or take a right turn from an intersection, something like that. So we can program stuff, and we just get the timestamps and data. The data gets recorded in the driving simulator. So we can also attach eye tracking there. So in IIT Indore, Professor Sanjram is working on eye tracking and driving. So the very interesting part about his research is he is not using a driving simulator. He's actually using a proper car. He's using head-mounted eye tracking systems, and so he is actually collecting data in a residential area which is under construction. So the roads are made, but people don't live there. So he has put on signs, and it's a proper driving task. The drivers come, drivers stretch, and he tries to see how where they're looking when they're looking at the signboards, if they're looking at the signboards and also unable to detect the signboards, and something like that. Okay, so I'll end the presentation with an advertisement of the London Transport Department. The video quality is not so good, but yeah, just follow this. So what happens in big cities like London is that people often do not look forward to cyclists. They often miss cyclists that are coming. So they are focusing on their primary driving task, and they miss certain stimulus that they're not expecting. For example, in the video, if you have noticed that there's this moonwalking bear that's coming in between. Okay, so when you are actually focusing on the people who are people in white jersey, there's this black moonwalking deer which is coming through the video. Okay, so yeah, that's what happens, and that is why we need to work on psychology, cognitive psychology, and cognitive science, and apply our knowledge in such fields. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Devaporna ma'am, for the wonderful presentation. Before we move forward, just a reminder, please be sure to type your questions into the chat box. Okay, so if you have any question regarding the presentations, if you have any other query, please write the questions in the chat box. I will request Ohana to introduce our final speaker of the day, Ms. Shabnam Basu.
So we have come far in this webinar, and we are proceeding towards the last presentation of today. Before I give an introduction about Shabnam ma'am, I am glad that all the three speakers today are the ex-students of Bethune College, and it's a privilege to introduce them. Ms. Shabnam Basu is currently pursuing her PhD from the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at IIT Kanpur. She is working in the area of organizational cognition, and her research interest includes decision-making, personality, metacognition, material effectiveness, and work-life balance. She is also interested in the area of emotion and has worked on a project aimed at studying the moral emotions of guilt, shame, remorse, and also possesses experience of working on emotion and mental health of prison inmates. Today, in her talk titled Cutting Edge Research Integrating the Several Subdisciplines of Psychology, ma'am would first provide a brief overview of some of the lab instruments that have a wide scope and are used by several subdisciplines simultaneously, the multifaceted nature of behavioral decision-making with implications for organizational behavior, behavioral economics, and medical decision-making would also be touched upon. Finally, the talk will culminate by explaining the process of embarking on a PhD journey, particularly at the IITs. I would like to hand over to ma'am. Shabnam ma'am, are you there?
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. And I'm really very happy to be talking here, coming back to my old place, to my college. And it's actually a very big privilege talking in front of my teachers and also my colleagues, two of my colleagues, Rucharita and Devaporna, and all the students who are presently there at the Bethune College. Now, I'll just share my screen. Yeah, is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay. So, Shucharita and Devaparna have very nicely described what psychology is and what are the different researches that are going on. Shucharita has touched upon the paradigms which are there, the ontology and the epistemology, and Devaparna has very vividly talked about cognitive science. Now, what I'm going to focus upon is the innovative research that is going on within the subdisciplines of psychology. So I would be naming them as cutting edge research because a lot of innovation and innovative researches are actually going on within psychology. And what actually happens is the boundaries or the branches of psychology that we had studied initially clinical psychology, organizational, neuro, cognitive, these boundaries are no longer so strict today. Okay, they are actually dissolving. So certain instruments, lab instruments, which were previously designed only for cognitive experiments or neuropsychological experiments, are now being used by several other branches of psychology also. Okay, so someone who is interested in clinical psychology or someone who's interested in social psychology, they are also using these instruments, lab instruments, in their research, and the implications are actually very wonderful. They have wonderful results and wonderful findings from their research. So the boundary is somewhat dissolving. It's not a strict cutting the boundary, but it's actually a cutting edge research which is integrating the several subdisciplines of psychology. So firstly, as I said, I'll be talking about certain innovative research tools and instruments also. For example, the biofeedback machine, the thermal camera, the eye tracker. I'll try to describe the instruments, give you some pictures, and try to explain what the main purpose of these instruments are. And then I'll be talking about certain implications in the different branches or the subdisciplines of psychology. Then I'll be talking about behavioral decision making. Why behavioral decision making? Because this is actually emerging as a subdiscipline of psychology, which has implications in several other disciplines. For example, behavioral decision making is being used by cognitive psychologists, by clinical psychologists, by medical professionals, even by economists. Okay, so this is such a field which is actually again integrating the several branches of psychology. Now, lastly, I'll be talking about the journey, the PhD journey, with particular emphasis on IIT. So, what all you have to do if you want to apply for PhD at IITs and how the journey will go on. And then lastly, we'll have the question answer sessions. So first, the lab instrument. This is the biofeedback instrument. Okay, so what is the biofeedback? It is an instrument which is consisting of 5 measures. Actually, more than 5 measures are also used. Eventually, it's up to the researcher that what instruments the researcher is willing to use, but commonly, the galvanic skin response, the GSR, the temperature, the heart rate, the blood volume pressure, and the respiration are the measures which are included in the biofeedback. Okay, so how do we measure them? So for the first 4, we have the sensors which are attached to your fingers. Okay, so if there's a participant coming on in an experimental setup, you have a lab, you invite a participant, and you then first of all, any before using actually any kind of device, this is a kind of note you have to make, that before using any kind of device, the first thing that is very important is when the participant enters the lab, you have to let the participant some time to get adjusted to the environment of the lab. Okay, so we have all been writing that rapport was built with the participant. We built a rapport with the participant by talking and by speaking. So this is what are the actual uses, because if the person is nervous or actually came running or cycling and is in a different sphere of mind, it's very important to first calm down the participant and then use any kind of devices that we are talking about. So here also, first, after the participant is getting relaxed, you will be attaching the sensors to the participant's finger. So galvanic skin response is the first one, and then the temperature sensor, you can see the heart rate. And for the respiration, we have a belt. Okay, this belt is tied just below your chest area, and the comfort level is actually asked to the participant whether they're comfortable or not, and they will sit and stand and look at from various positions whether they're comfortable or not, and then will proceed to the actually collection of data, or the experiment, proceed to the experiment. So if you see the picture on the right hand side, this is actually the corresponding graphs that you get from these devices. Okay, moving on, this is actually from my data. So what I did is, I was collecting, this was just a hands-on experiment which I did just to know what is biofeedback. Okay, so what I did is, I was working on emotions, and 2 sets of images were prepared. One is positive laden images of emotions, and one is the negative laden pictures. So the main element being the 5 earthly elements like fire, water, air, all this. So fire, for example, a funeral pyre for a negative picture, a wedding fire for a positive picture. So what first needs to be established in these are the stimuli I was talking about. So firstly, what you need to do is you have to first get a baseline. So first you attach all the sensors, then you make the participants sit and relax, staring at a blank screen. So no stimuli at all. So that is where you establish the baseline of all the markers that you're going to measure, whether it be respiration or your skin response or your temperature. Because without having a baseline, you cannot know, or you cannot compare that how the waves are forming, how the increase or the decrease in arousal is happening. Okay, so here in the right side picture you can see this is the baseline condition, the first one, and then how when the stimuli are given, the measures actually increase. Okay, this is the obtained data, and different markers can also be given. Markers as in sense, because the pictures will be randomized, you'll be having positive and negative pictures. So before the starting of every picture there will be a marker, so that you will be getting an option to set this marker. This will be a software, and you will be using the software to set where you will be putting the markers. The participants won't be able to see that. The participants will straight on see the pictures one by one, and they will be having certain kind of response also. If you want to keep any subjective response after each emotion laden picture, you want to say the participant to identify or rate on a scale of 1 to 5 whether the picture was positive, negative, and how much positive, the intensity and everything. So these are the mixing up of behavioral as well as your neurophysiological data. Okay, so moving on to the implications. What are the implications? Straight on research obviously is a very big implication of the biofeedback machine, and it's a very objective method which is being used by psychologists for measuring the any kind of arousal situation, any kind of autonomic nervous changes that is happening. Okay, so these are physiological changes, and they're highly sensitive to emotion. So research, neuropsychology research are all taking this biofeedback machine into consideration. The second implication is in terms of treatment. Okay, so anxiety, stress, and other kinds of problems also. For example, a person suffering from PTSD, or a person who has just encountered a accident situation, they need relaxation to a considerable degree. So for them also this can be used. How this can be used, or how this is actually being used, uh, you will actually attach the sensors to the patient or the participant, whoever is there, and then they will be monitoring their own heart rate, their own respiration rate. They can see the wave formations on the screen. So by seeing the wave formations and the increase in their respiration, the increase in their heart rate, and there will be an expert obviously to guide the whole scenario, the therapy scenario, they will guide the patients into reducing the heart rate, reducing the respiration, and bringing everything to a stable point. So if you can see something moving up and you try to relax, and actually you see that it is moving down, it's kind of reinforcing, right? So it will actually be reinforcing for the participant or the patient also. And in this way, they will try more to bring the levels down to a more normal and stable level. So by looking at your own physiological measures or signals, you will be able to, so that is why it is known as biofeedback. Okay, so it's kind of a loop which is working. The more you see that the curve is declining, the more relaxed you feel, and again, the more relaxed you feel, the more the waves or the relaxation pattern will be showed in the wave formations. Okay, the third, which is a very important or very interesting implication of biofeedback, is in the gaming industry. So recently I came to know about a game known as Nevermind. It was actually developed in 2015. And what the game is about is you will be in the role of a therapist or an expert who would be treating certain patients. You would be called by an institution. This is a plot of the game. Okay, you will be called by an institution where you will have to deal with certain patients and their subconscious memories and minds and anything that is going under their mind. Okay, so their subconscious thoughts and processes and memories will be what you would be exploring. Now, what the main catch of the game is that when you start playing the game, so this the biofeedback is actually a major element of the game. The biofeedback will be attached to this, and then is when the game will be at its full force and actually working very nicely. So you would be attaching the biofeedback, whether it be the respiration belt or the skin response, and then start to play the game. So when you play the game, you'll be entering into this mind of one of your subjects or one of your patients, and gradually when you move it, it's actually kind of a environment which is actually horror laden, which would be created. Okay, so it will be all kind of creepy creatures all there hiding, lurking behind trees or something. And the more anxious you get, the faster your heart beats, the harder and the scarier the game will get. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to monitor your own heart rate and your own anxiety level. So the more relaxed you are, the game will be actually reduce, the level, the hard level of the game will actually be reduced. The more easier and the moderately easier levels you'll be getting. So there was one example which I would be quoting is, at one level there would be water all over there's a two-story building, and you are trapped in one of the floors of the building, and water is actually, the water level is increasing. Okay, the more tensed you are, the more nervous and anxious you are for finding a solution, that how to actually find a drainage for this water, or how to get out of the room, the faster the water level will fill the room. But the more relaxed you are, so the more the relaxed you'll try yourself to be, the slower the water level will rise. Okay, so this is how the game goes on, and you have to play along with this, and it's kind of like, for reducing your anxiety and stress, you have to do this exercise. And this is actually a horror game. Other games are also being used, like for example, controlling flying dragons. The more relaxed you are, the higher and the faster the dragons will fly. Similarly, with changing of seasons also, the more relaxed you are, the faster you can make the season change from winter to spring. So this is all the gaming industry implications that are actually using biofeedback machine in their game innovation techniques. Okay, even these games are sometimes used by researchers also, who are working with biofeedback, the flying dragon game or the changing season game, to see whether games are more effective in reducing your anxiety. So just staring at certain figures or certain wavelengths, and as compared to that, giving certain games where relaxation will give you more points, fetch you brownie points, obviously the game will work better in the treatment. So this is all about biofeedback.
থেকে ডালটা নিয়ে আসতে হবে।
Okay, so moving on, next is the thermal camera. Okay, so the left hand side image actually shows you the thermal camera. If you can see, this is the thermal camera, and it is attached to a laptop screen, which is the recording laptop. The main recording will go here in the laptop, and you can see a small screen within the laptop also, which is the image being produced by the thermal camera. Okay, so this is the main device. And the right hand side picture, the B, is the experimental setup. So I have used thermal camera in one of my projects for in which I was working with emotions only again. So here also, if you see the experimental setup, this is the thermal camera A attached to the C, the device which is recording the images from the thermal camera, and the stimuli will be given on the laptop B, and the participants will be sitting at a particular distance from the thermal camera. And this is the experimental setup which was used by us for the particular project. Now moving on, what does the thermal camera do? What image, or what is the implication, or what it is? If you can see in the figure 1, first you have to actually identify the ROIs. ROIs are the region of interests. Basically, in case of a human face, if you see, the basic regions of interest which we look at are the forehead, the nasal tip, the cheek areas, the chin areas, and also the eye, the surrounding area of the eyes, because these areas are most sensitive to temperature variations. So what a thermal camera does, thermal camera tries to detect any kind of temperature changes. Okay, the images which are produced are because of the temperature changes, they are known as thermal images. Okay, so because of any kind of thermal changes, you will be having the images will be reflecting that particular changes. So if you see the left hand side image, the first part of the image, they are the blood vessels. Okay, so because we have a lot of blood vessels in these area of our faces, so any kind of emotional arousal you talk about, there has to be certain kind of thermal changes going on inside the, like in the different area of your face. For example, when you are too afraid, then you might notice a drop in temperature. If you are embarrassed or shame or guilty, you might notice a little bit rise in temperature. That similar thing was noticed in our study also. This the right hand figure, the figure 2, is from our study, the our project, where we were trying to differentiate between the thermal signatures of guilt, shame, and remorse. And if you see, a very starking difference has been observed for remorse, in between remorse and guilt. So if you see the guilt picture, the temperature is quite high in the face. If you see the temperature sliding bar is also given at the right hand side, the temperature is quite high for the face. But if you see the remorse condition, the temperature is not so high. Okay, so this is how the temperature changes will tell you about the emotions and the signature temperature. If there's any particular area which actually is seen in every research to be very sensitive to change of one particular emotion, then that can be uh, indicated as the major signal area or the ROI area for that particular emotion. Okay, so this is what the thermal camera does. Lastly, the implications of thermal camera. Here also we have a lot of implications for thermal camera. First of all, as you know, emotion research, any kind of emotions we talk about has certain kind of changes, neuroautonomic changes, that will be that will lead to parasympathetic as well as sympathetic changes, and that will be reflected on the temperature of your face. So shame, guilt, embarrassment, these are certain moral emotions in which the temperature changes can be observed. Fear and anger, when you get angry, the temperature of your face also tend to increase. These are also certain kinds of areas where you can see. And again, the stress response, the flight or the fight response, there also temperature variances can be observed. Now, apart from emotion research and neuropsychological research, there are certain implication of thermal camera in forensic psychology also. For example, if you see the moral emotions, guilt and shame, or remorse, then detecting this kind of thermal changes on your face actually will tell you about the condition of the inmate, whether the jail inmate, the prisoner, is actually feeling guilty or not. If the person is feeling guilty, then the signature, as I was telling, the area of interest which have been researched along for a long period of time in different cultures also, you would see that the area which is most sensitive to guilt, it said that the cheek area is very sensitive to guilt. So if the temperature around the cheek area is very high, then you have to understand the jail inmate is feeling guilty about a particular task. And you can now understand the implication, the varied implication it might have. The person is actually feeling guilty, then that might also help us in detecting whether actually the person is at fault or not. Okay, so further research and further communication interview with the participant, with the jail inmate, will help us actually detecting whether the thermal changes that are occurring, because the thermal change is something that is not in the control of the prisoner. Okay, it's something which is out of the control of the prisoner. So even very subtle changes are also being observed by the thermal camera. So this has a very high, a very large implication in forensic psychology. Second, another implication is surveillance. If you see the right hand figure, it's actually infrared camera vision, which was captured by the Massachusetts State Police via helicopter. Two people were actually covered with tarpaulin sheets, were hiding inside this boat. Okay. Now, when the police were actually having this patrol, they were actually patrolling the whole town, they observed, using thermal camera, they observed that there are certain temperature rise inside the boat, which is uh, something which is an abnormality. So if the engine is not like working, the temperature of the boat will not be so high. So they detected that there might be someone who is hiding inside the boat, and this is how they were actually caught. So surveillance is a very big thing, which is where the implication of infrared cameras or the thermal cameras are huge. Again, in firefighting scenarios, in many situations we feel, or the firefighters feel, that the fire has actually subsidized. There is no fire. Even in wildfire cases, we feel that the fire is no longer there. But using thermal camera, they can actually see or check for themselves whether the fire has actually died out or not, because many a cases a small flake might be there, and that might be creating more wildfires or more tragic situations. Okay, so in firefighting also this camera is having a very high use. Search and rescue, if there's a lot of smoke in firefighting situation, not the fire but the smoke kind of situation, and a person is trapped inside it, you can understand when a person is in a smoke filled room, the person gets unconscious, right? So the person cannot respond to the firefighters if they are trapped inside the room. So the infrared cameras are used for search and rescue also. The infrared cameras will help the firefighters to look out for these kind of situations. Navigation and road safety, so infrared cameras work without light. Okay, if the environment is totally out of light, then also because it's the temperature variance that they are recording, so no kind of lights are needed. So just imagine a naval ship which is going on in the sea. The sea has no light of its own, and it's an immense huge blank empty space kind of thing. If there is any other vessel or any kind of obstruction in the way, the thermal camera can actually help them get rid of that problem. Like any clashes or any kind of obstruction that they might face would be detected by the thermal camera. Same for road safety also. If you're driving in a road which has no light of its own, the street lights are not there, so any kind of cyclists, as just Devaporna had pointed out, the cyclists or any kind of other persons also walking in the street in the entire darkness can be detected by the use of thermal camera. Okay, so these are the implications of thermal camera. Then we'll move on to the eye tracking machine. Now, the first picture, if you see A, it is the laptop mounted eye tracker. So if you see the red lights just below the laptop, this is actually the eye tracking device which is attached to your laptop. Okay, and the B situation is an experimental setup that people are using, the traditional in the sense the laptop mounted device. So this is the participant. The chair is actually not very appropriate. I will not say this is a very appropriate chair for eye tracking, because it's a revolving chair, and the use of certain fixed kind of chair is actually more scientifically or more objective, because otherwise you'll move to a considerable degree. So apart from the chair, this is the experimental setup of traditional device. Okay, so you will be sitting on a chair looking at the laptop where the stimuli will appear, and the laptop will have, or the computer will have, the uh, eye tracking device inbuilt or attached to it, and it will actually give you data. This is the experimenter who would be able to see your data in a side by manner in another computer. Lastly, the C is the new mobile device, which is very handy and very mobile. If you can see, it's just a kind of specs. If you wear this, the eye tracker is actually, it's inbuilt in this glasses. So it can be used in environments which are not in the laboratory. Okay, so not only in laboratory, but actual market research. If you see, market research are nowadays relying hugely on eye trackers, so this can be used by them to actually examine participants, or actually examine consumers who are in the market, and how they make choices, where they look. Okay, so first I need to explain what are the features of the eye tracker. So what we see and what we get, what is the data we receive. So first is, it also uses the infrared light to see or track our eye movement, and certain other measures like the size of your pupil, etc., are also recorded. So what are the things that are recorded? First is the fixation. So what is fixation? Fixation is the period when your eye is relatively stationary, taking in information. For example, you're reading this line, then your eye is fixated at this line, and it will move from left to right. If you're examining a picture, then the same way your eyes will be fixated at that particular picture. That is what fixation are. Okay, so the number of fixations, the amount of fixation, everything will give you very good information about in which way the participant actually saw the whole information that was displayed. Second is the saccades, which are the rapid eye movements between fixation. So it's not like you only fixate at one point and just go on reading or examining one point. Your eyes will move from this point to this point to this point to this point, and again the bold letters will attract your attention more. So this is how your eye movement will be recorded also. Okay, so first the fixation point, and then how you move from one fixation point to other fixation point. There might be certain other distractions also while you're reading, certain other things things might come just in between and distract you, and then that also will be seen by the result, in the result, that what distracted you or what attracted your attention. Next are the gaze paths and the heat maps. Why these are in bold, I'll explain you. These are actually the two most prominent measures or data that we consider when we interpret the results for eye tracking. Gaze paths are actually the summation of fixation and saccades. I will show you the picture just in the next slide. Then you'll understand in a more better way what are the gaze paths. Heat maps are actually telling you about an overall picture. It will give you an overall picture about which are the places where the participant had attracted or had given the most attention during viewing of a screen. Okay. And other than this, eye blinking and pupil dilation, as I said, are other measures which can be obtained by eye tracker. Okay, now the first picture is of gaze plot and the second picture is of the heat map. I've used the same picture in both the cases. Although the gaze plot, I'm not very big fan of this picture of gaze plot, because here, if you see, the circles are of same size, but usually the circles actually vary in size depending upon the time, the duration a participant has looked on at a particular point. So the circles will be of different sizes. Small circles will represent just a fraction of seconds you have looked at that particular point, and big circles will represent that the person has actually looked at that point for a particular period of time. So actually I wanted to keep the picture same. That is why I found this picture that had the same kind of heat map and gaze plot. That is why I kept this picture. Otherwise the circles are not something which I'm a fan of. So if you see, the first thing is number 1 here. If you see number 1, then that means the participant first had looked at the head of the picture. Okay, so here was the first one, and then if you could find 2, I think it's below somewhere here, the 3 is here. So this is how the saccades moved. So first fixated here, then went here to read the sentence, and then moved from there to here to read the bold sentence. As I said, the bold sentence will actually attract your attention, and then again went to read the blue sentences which are written, and then went back to the healthcare.gov website name, and this is how the whole thing will go on. So from where you moved where, so from the fixation and the saccades, everything will be given in the gaze plot. Okay, next is the heat map. Heat map will say the maximum amount of time the participants had given to a particular scenario or a particular sentence. For example, the face, if you see, it's red, more red. So the more the redder, that means the more amount of attention it has received. So this particular point has received maximum attention, the face of the man. Okay, and then the second is this sentence, this word. Okay, rejected, this sentence has, or this word has been attracting the second highest attention. Moving on, here also there might be something which attracted attention, the just the lower level, and then here and here. Okay, these are the positions which attracted attention. Most other green dots have also attracted attention, and that is how the whole heat map and the gaze plot will help you in determining whether which things attract most attention. So if you can see, its implication in market research is actually huge. In consumer psychology also, a lot of research has been going on with eye tracking machine. And if you see the first image, the market research, the new device, the mobile device is being used, where the participant is actually in a marketplace, in a market area, and has mounted on this eye tracker, and then the data which you will get will actually tell that which are the products that the person had paid most attention to, or which are the products which attracted most attention. For example, the left hand side corner, if you see, this had attracted the most attention. The lower level racks attract the least attention. This is again a finding of the market research, that the products which are arranged in the lower racks attract least attention. Okay, so this is how the market research is actually using eye tracking machine. Again, in research in cognitive science, as Devaporna said, in driving also, this eye tracking machine is being used. For example, I have given a picture of driving also. This is the gaze plot. If you see, this is a difference or comparison made between the novice and the experienced driver. The first set of pictures are for the novice drivers, the second are for the experienced drivers. If you see, the novice driver will first look at the road, and then will look at the car, and then we'll look at the distance between the car and the road for making a turn over here. This is actually a turn which is represented in the picture. Okay, so the last picture you will see the novice driver is trying to figure out the distance between the wall and the parked car, and how he would actually drive the car in between these two spaces when taking the turn. But as compared to this, the experienced driver, if you see in the first picture, analyzes the gap, the parked car as well as the path. In the second picture, the gaze actually is fixed at the path only, and even the third picture, the gaze is fixed at the path. So, if any car is coming from that turn, the experienced driver will easily be able to detect. But the novice driver is actually paying attention to the distance between the car and the wall. So, any kind of incoming car from this turn will be missed at the first sight by the novice driver, and that might create anxiety, and that might again make cases worse for the novice driver as compared to the experienced driver. Okay, again, in gaming also eye tracking is being used, although it's actually the gaming industry is just using it. It's not like the biofeedback, where again the games are used by researchers also in treatment or in other research. But here it's only the gaming industry which is putting use of eye tracker. For example, there's a game named Before Your Eyes, where the game is actually has replaced the click of the mouse or the click of the keyboard with that of your eye tracking, how you will look towards the, for example, it's a fighting game where you will actually have to fight certain other people like PUBG or something, where if you focus on your screen, the place where you will focus your eyes on, and then you will press a particular key, the bullets will be shot at that particular point your eyes are looking at. So if an enemy is coming from the corner, around the corner, if you focus on the enemy and then press the key, the place where you are looking at towards the enemy will be shot. Okay, so this is how the eye tracking is being used by the gaming industry. And there's also another kind of gaming techniques which are being used, which are using eye tracker, for example chess. So expert and novices are again feeded with this eye tracking machine, mounted with eye tracking machine, and their chess movements are being recorded, and this is being used to actually predict movements. So the data which is being obtained are used for prediction of chess movements by experts and novices. So if you play with your computer nowadays, the computer might have eye tracking data of experts, and then or novices, whichever level you play, and then you play with the computer. It's like artificial intelligence. They have this data on how to begin, how to end, how to move your and which part of the player, which part of the board the player is looking at, and everything. The data is with the artificial intelligence or the computer you're playing the chess with. Apart from that, commercial applications like in advertisements, eye tracker are being used. For example, again in designing also, packaging also, they are using how to design a web page, which are the things that attracts, and where is the particular position where a person looks most, or which are the particular stylistic things that a person can do in the web page, so that that particular thing attracts attention. So commercial applications are also very huge of this eye tracking machine. So this is all about the three devices available. Next is the behavioral decision making. So what is behavioral decision making, and why am I focusing on behavioral decision making? Behavioral decision making is actually has a lot of scope. Okay, it has a wide application, and it has scope in several fields. What is it? So starting from the beginning, you might have certain styles of responding to behavior situation, like your habit, whatever it is, whether you are a rational decision maker or an intuitive decision maker, or you might even be a dependent decision maker who always goes for advice to other people before taking a decision. So what is your style? That is the first kind of research that is going on, or the first kind of field that is taking into decision making research. Okay, again there are two styles which were identified by a Nobel Prize winning author, Herbert Simon, who talked about maximizing and satisficing. He actually gave the theory of bounded rationality. My research is actually based on this theory of bounded rationality. And he talked about that behavioral economics, in behavioral economics, people have talked about choices and rational choices mostly. They said that people actually see the utility, calculate probabilities, and then take a decision. So that is the most rational way to go. You will take that decision, you will choose that option that yields the highest utility. But in actual life, it is seen that there are many constraints to this, because That is why Simon had called it bounded rationality, that our rationality is bounded. Okay, so what happens is the amount of information that is actually needed for making a rational decision, for calculating the utility of each of the option, is not available to us always. We might not have all the information about all the alternatives that are available. For example, you choosing a college for higher secondary education. Now, there are plenty of colleges in India as well as abroad. So the more the choices will increase, the more information you have to seek about all these colleges. Now, there will be certain colleges which you will be leaving behind, or you would not be able to access the information, or you would not be having information for that particular college. So that is where your information will be incomplete. So just telling that a rational choice will have pros and cons seen or utility measured for all the options is not correct, right? Because the information processing information is not available to the fullest degree. Second, our information processing capacity is also limited. We cannot process unlimited amount of information. There are certain constraints to our cognitive capacity also, the cognitive load that we are able to take, that we can take. So this is another constraint that Herbert Simon talked about when taking rational decision making into consideration. Despite this, even today, rational decision making is actually, the research on rational decision making is huge. The effectiveness that is considered in relation to rational decision making is also considered to be very great and very effective, despite of all the constraints that we are talking about. This is because of the process that is involved in rational decision making. Although, so there's a difference between the process and the outcome. Okay, so the process is that the process you are taking, for example, as I said, maximizing and satisfying, these are different in terms of processing of information. Maximizers are very similar to rational decision makers in the sense that they move on from one alternative to other alternative. They try to actually get as much information about each alternative possible, does the pros and cons, and then takes a decision, tries to maximize their utility and maximize the information that is available. As compared to that, satisficers, what they do is, whenever they reach a satisfactory option that, yeah, this will do, they stop their search. They will not search for more options. So whenever they get a college, the satisficers will get a college which will actually be satisfactory to them, that they have the criterias A, B, and C, and this college is meeting the criteria A, B, and C. They will stop the search. But maximizers will go on and see if they can find another better college. So it's search for perfection, search for betterness. They go on and on searching for more information. Okay, so these are both the kind of styles which are there. Outcome might be very different. Again, outcome in terms of the decision quality you have taken, in terms of the biases that you have not fallen prey to. There are many biases and heuristics that happen, that take place when you take a decision. It might be the availability heuristic, it might be any kind of overconfidence bias that you are suffering from. So all these biases and heuristics also affect your decision making process. And the environmental and task conditions are also very important when we talk about decision making. For example, risky decision making, complex decision making, opportunistic decision making. These are certain task or environment related conditions which are important when we talk about decision making. For example, a person in gambling, decision making plays a very important role. That how in gambling people would lose a lot of money in the prospect of winning some small amount of money. Okay, they would think that this time I would be winning. So the decision making capacity that the person is utilizing at that particular point in gambling is a very is a focus of interest for us. Okay, that why the person is taking such decisions. So this is how decision making research is going on in different fields. Lastly, moral decision making is another, where ethical decision making comes into play. Next slide, I'll be focusing a little bit on moral decision making. I'll give you one food for thought for moral or ethical decision making. Before that, I'll just highlight the scope of decision making in several fields. As I said, it's cutting across a lot of branches. I'm studying decision making in the context of organizational cognition. So, like the decision making of managers and how it will be affecting their work life balance, their effectiveness as managers, and what are the antecedent factors. How is personality affecting your decision making? And there are many other cognitive factors also which might affect. So, this is what my scope or my research deals with. Second is behavioral economics, I have, again, in my research, the flavor of behavioral economics is there because the main theory that I am focusing upon is the bounded rationality theory, but by Simon. He was a behavioral economist. And in behavioral economics, decision making is a huge area with huge scope. 3 Nobel Prizes have been won on this area, particularly behavioral economics. First, Herbert Simon, then on heuristics and biases, Kahneman has won the Nobel Prize, and recently on nudging, the Nobel Prize was won. So that's also an area which is related to behavioral economics. Richard Thaler had won the Nobel Prize on nudging, which is related to decision making, how nudging can help in decision making. Okay, so this is about behavioral economics. In clinical psychology, again, in the next slide, I'll be talking about the implication of clinical psychology and decision making. Neuropsychology, okay. Firstly, decision making, when we think about decision making, the thing that comes in mind is it's about a cognitive process, right? We have also learned about decision making in the chapter of, or in the branch of, cognitive psychology. But neuropsychology, a lot of research has been done in neuropsychology on decision making, because there's a particular theory known as the somatic marker hypothesis, which says that people with frontal lobe damage, that area of emotion is also damaged. Those patients who have the area of emotion damaged and frontal lobe damage, their decision making ability is actually highly affected, but the other cognitive faculties are quite intact. For example, their attention sphere or their communication or other cognitive tasks which they participate in, their memory, they're all intact. But due to the effect on the emotion area of your brain, that is again affecting your decision making. This means that emotions play a vital part in your decision making. Okay, so that is how neuropsychology is dealing with decision making. Lastly, medical decision making is also very important. If you see decision making, doctors have to make a lot of decisions, a lot of very important decisions they need to take when they are going to surgery or they are diagnosing their patients. A lot of important decisions are taken by them. Second, patients on their part also has to take a lot of important decisions, whether they want to go for surgery or want to take up medicines or any other kind of therapy or any other kind of medication. It's up to the patient to decide. Again, the caretakers, whether a person who is in coma for a period of time, they want to keep that their closed one, their relatives, on life support for how much period of time, or they want to just end the life support, do not want their loved ones to go through the ventilator stage or anything. These are all the decisions which are taken by the patient's relatives, as well. Even the patients, if they are in a state of taking the decision, they also take certain decisions. So decision making in medical science is also a very huge broad prospect. Okay, the next, as I said, I will talk about ethical decision making. So it's actually a little bit food for thought for you all. This is known as the trolley problem. So you all please look at the picture if you can. This is a trolley which is coming on. It's a track, okay, and there's a person. Just imagine this person to be you standing beside the lever, and if you pull the lever, the trolley will actually divert and kill this one person, despite, and not kill the 5 persons in this row. They are actually tied to the railway tracks. Okay, this 5 persons and 1 person are tied to the railway track. If you pull the lever, the trolley will get diverted and will kill only 1 person rather than the 5 people involved. So will you pull the lever? This is the ethical dilemma, or the ethical problem, the ethical decision that needs to be taken. Okay, so will you pull the lever? So again, this is a food for thought for you all. So you might have different answers, different people might have different answers to this problem. Now this trolley problem has been actually seen from a various fields or perspectives, or this actually has been changed also. Instead of you pulling the lever, there will be a bridge on the top of this railway track, and you're standing on the bridge with a fat man. And a fat man, if you push the fat man to the track, the trolley will actually stop and just kill the fat man and not the 5 persons. So will you push the fat man? So there are various alternative versions of the trolley problem, each having serious implication also for research. So if you want to go through the trolley problem, you can search for the trolley problem. There's actually a food for thought. Another food for thought for you all is the paradox of choices. Now, are choices beneficial or detrimental? Now, in today's society, we have a lot of choices available to us. And are they actually benefiting us? Obviously, they are giving us control, they are giving us more independence, more the globalization, more the developed the nation is, more the choices the nation has. But it is actually benefiting you? Because it has been seen that more the choices you are given, more the confused you become, and more the post decisional regret you face. For example, we all have faced this problem. I think you enter a bus which is just empty and you have all the seats to yourself. You actually first have a lot of confusion choosing which seat you will choose for yourself. Like, you will sit on the side where which is windy, which is not sunny, where the sun will directly not fall on your face. You'll first choose that which is a place I want. And even after sitting, there might be some people who would be having this regret that, nah, I have chosen a bad seat. This is not the seat I should have chosen. I should have gone for any other seat. Okay, so this is the kind of the detrimental effect, or this is just a small detrimental, not a detrimental effect. This is a small consequence of having a lot of choices. But given choices in a globalized, technological, advanced modern society where choices are increasing a lot,
Hello,
this can
Shabnam.
actually...
Shabnam,
Yes,
can
ma'am.
you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm very sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your talk, but we are running short of time.
Yeah, ma'am,
So,
this is the last slide.
okay. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, so here you see that internal, stable, and global attribution might take place if choices increase, and it might lead to post decisional regret, self blame, and depression. Okay, here is all about all this. Lastly, just shortly, I'll tell you about the PhD, what you need to do. First is the national eligibility test that you need to actually give for your PhD journey. This is actually the entrance exam. And that's not an entrance, actually, eligibility examination, which you have to give in order to apply for PhD at any university or any institute you're looking for. Next is find your area of interest and then search for university. If you're interested in decision making, you will see for universities which are working on decision making. If you're interested in cognitive science, search for universities which are working in cognitive science. Now, talking about IIT admission process, first is the eligibility criteria applications shortlisting, which is you will give your application, and then based on your scores, for example, I think that's a cutoff between 60% for bachelor's and 70% for masters. This is what the eligibility criteria cutoff is for IIT. Your application will be shortlisted. This is the first step. Second is you have to give a written test and also an interview. Okay. Second, the PhD process is the duration of 5 years. The first year will be of coursework. You will have 4 courses in the first year, where you will be getting an opportunity to interact with different professors in the institute. And then after interacting with the professors, you will be selecting them, selecting your supervisors by when you have actually proper knowledge about all the professors there. In the second semester, you will start working on your thesis. Apart from, you'll also have to do 2 courses. Third, you have to give a comprehensive examination at the end of 1 year based on the courses you have taken. Okay, so courses you read, the 4 plus 2, 6 courses. You have to select any 3 to 4 courses, and then you have to give a comprehensive, whether it be a viva or written exam, depending on the department, the faculties who are there. You will be having to give an examination. After passing this examination, you will be called a student of the institute, a PhD student of the institute. Before that, you're just doing coursework and you have provisionally been admitted. Then you'll have a committee also will look into your thesis progress from time to time. And then the SOTA is the proposal that you're going to present in front of the whole faculty and the students there. You'll have to explain your whole proposal, and then you'll getting comments and suggestion. Based on that, you'll be working on your whole PhD. Then is data collection, and there are many other tasks which you do in between. For example, the being a tutor, like you'll be teaching other students, or you will be assisting your professors in correcting questions and answer scripts or making questions. That is a teaching assistant. These are some things you have to do when you are in a IIT doing your PhD. Lastly, you will be giving your open seminar, which is again very similar to your SOTA. It's just SOTA is like giving a proposal, and open seminar is culminating your research, like what are your findings and what you found. Then after an open seminar, you will also get suggestion from professors in your open seminar. Based on this, you make changes and make submission. And lastly, your defense. This is it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for the enriching presentation. Before we proceed to the interactive session, I would request all the participants to fill up the feedback form that is available in the chat box. We appreciate your valuable feedback, so please check the chat box. Shawnee has given it there. So please fill the form up And certificates will be delivered after the successful submission of the filled-in feedback form. So make sure you fill it. So next, we'll go ahead and take some questions because we don't have much time. So we'll just take 3 questions. The first question is by Shomopatra to Shucharita ma'am. I want to know what are the areas that can be explored through qualitative research, and also we have heard of the gaining popularity of mixed method approaches in family science and family therapy. What are the possible challenges faced by researchers in this approach? Shucharita ma'am, can you please unmute your mic?
Yeah, so yeah, I will at first ask you, what is your area of interest?
To me, ma'am, or to Shomapatra?
Yeah, to the person who is asking this question.
To Shomapatra. Can you please, Shomapatra, can you please...
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon.
Yeah. What is your area of interest?
Actually, I'm in a confused state, but obviously I am interested about the applied branch of psychology, like where it can get applied, be it the clinical one or the organizational one. But research works do fascinate me. And while actually looking at your slides, I read a few days ago about this multi-method approach, which were getting used in families, like those family scientists were using it in some kind of therapies or in their research works. So I found that very amazing. So I just wanted to ask that what are the levels of challenges that can get faced? Because we know that in a country like India, therapy is still something which is not very much acknowledged. Like obviously situations are changing. So this kind of researchers must have certain kind of loopholes or challenges also on the part of the researchers. So I wanted to ask about that.
So to answer your first question, a lot of social psychologists, organizational psychologists, and clinical psychologists, they have been using qualitative methodology in recent times. It really depends on the particular research question that you are interested in. That's why I wanted to ask you about your research interest. But yeah, I'm not a clinical psychologist. You're talking about therapy. But I do know about a lot of work in the context of health psychology and especially in the context of criticizing the biomedical model in the context of, culture. So I would suggest you to read the work of Kleinman. Okay, Kleinman. You can drop me an email. Maybe I will send you a detailed reading list related to this area. Okay. I cannot really tell you what is the, and in terms of mixed method research, my own PhD work is based on that. Mixed method research definitely has some benefits because uh, uh, obviously it combines the quantitative and qualitative approach. Therefore, whatever the limitations both of these methods have, they kind of try to take a very pragmatic standpoint and they practically try to maximize the extent to which we can reach at the reality. So yeah, definitely mixed method approach is one of the budding approaches that we are using in psychology these days, and you can definitely explore this area. I would ask you to read about Creswell's work. Like he has written some really beautiful books, like 2 or 3 books and many papers. You can explore them in order to get an understanding of mixed method research. In terms of loopholes, see, quantitative and qualitative researchers, they have completely different understanding of the subject matter. So they will always attack each other. There is a paradigm war always happening over there. Whereas mixed method researchers, they are taking a middle ground. So mixed method researchers, they usually get lesser criticism because they have kind of combined both of them. But if your research question is such that it can be best dealt with a qualitative research approach or a quantitative research approach, for instance, the work of Devaporna, it can be best dealt with a quantitative approach. So it is really related to your research question and your research interest. So that's all I can say. Am I clear?
Thank you, ma'am.
Okay.
Thank you, Shucharita ma'am. Before the next question, I would request our speakers if they can please share their email IDs with the students. So because we cannot take up all the questions, so if they can contact you through the email. everyone, please check the chat box. IDs. So the next question is for Devaporna ma'am by Aratrika Sengupta. What are the different prospects of cognitive psychology abroad? Where and how to pursue it?
Oh my God, I'm not really sure about how to pursue it, but all I can say is, since I'm working on driving research and cognitive research, so I can talk about some universities where they are actually dealing with driving psychology, traffic psychology. Yeah, that's all I can say right as of now. Right. So there's a Center for Driving Research and Traffic Psychology in MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, where there's this professor Talib Rotengater who has a very beautiful book on traffic psychology. It's named Traffic Psychology. Other than that, we have traffic psychology research in University of Sussex by Professor Graham Hall. He is also working on cognitive psychology and traffic. So yeah, and there's research in University of California. For some time, I was collaborating with this person, Philip Singh from University of Taipei. There's Brian Porter from University of Illinois, Chicago. So yeah, that's. But I'm not very sure about the admission process and all.
Thank you, ma'am. The next question is for Shabnam ma'am by Audrija Bhattacharya. I wanted to know, is there any distinctions regarding applying to the IITs between the students of MA and MSc psychology? Can students having a MA degree apply?
Yeah, definitely. Students with any degree, MA or MSc in psychology, can apply in IITs. The procedure is very same. You have to give your NET exam, you have to qualify for that, and then you have to send your fill up the form where your postgraduate marks, your bachelor's marks, and everything will be recorded. And based on that, you will be called for your written exam and your interview. There's no other distinction based on your MA degree or MSc degree.
Thank you, ma'am. So we'll end the interactive session here because we are short of time. So thank you to all our speakers for their valuable time and for answering the questions and for the enriching presentations. I'm sure all of us, we have gained a lot of knowledge throughout the session. So I would, so we have come to the end, and now I'll request everyone if you can turn your camera on for a picture.
Hello, everybody. I was supposed to take the picture, but I think I am facing some problem. So could anybody else kindly take the picture?
Yes, I'm taking it. Wait.
Thank you, Ashiti.
Thank you. So now I would request the senior most faculty of Psychology Department of Bethune College, Dr. Shamuli Sen, to convey the vote of thanks. Over to you, SS ma'am.
So, come to the end point. On behalf of the Department of Psychology, Bethune College, I extend my sincere thanks to our three speakers of the day, Dr. Sucharita Majhi, Ms. Nam Basu, and Ms. Devaporna Mukherjee, shown our students of psychology the scope of higher education in Indian institutions. Dr. Majhi is Assistant professor in the Department of Human Sciences, IIT Dhanbad. She has explained about qualitative research in psychology, state of the art and future. Ms. Shabnam Basu and Devaporna Mukherjee, senior research scholars at IIT Kanpur. Today, Ms. Devaporna Mukherjee highlighted on of today. They are the students of our department. So they have made us proud for their achievement. We are thankful to our principal madam, Professor Krishna Roy, who inspired us to conduct such programs. Let me thank Dr. Shatarupa Bandyopadhyay, convener, Tawani, Anandita, Ayushi, Ahona, Prakriti, Obhipsha, Manjima, Shmipata, Surosri, and Sneha. I also extend my heartfelt thanks to all our UG and PG students who have patiently heard these 3 consecutive lectures. Hope it will help in their career choice. Finally, I am thankful for organizing such a wonderful webinar. Thank you all.
Thank you, Aziz ma'am. And please, once more, can you please turn on your videos, because we have missed Envy ma'am in the last picture and it's never complete without her. So please, everyone, can you please turn it on? I'll take the picture again. Thank you. Okay, so we have come to the end of the webinar. On behalf of all the students, I want to thank our professors and the Career Counseling Cell of Bethune College for organizing this enriching and fruitful webinar for us. We are really thankful to all of you. And I would like to thank Ohana for being such a lovely co-host. And lastly, to the participants, thank you everyone for being such a cooperative and lovely audience. We appreciate you being here. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So shall we leave now? Ayushi, can we leave now?
Yes, ma'am. Make sure everyone filled up the feedback form. Otherwise, there will be a problem with the certificates. So,
নীলাঞ্জনা দি লিভ করতে পারো, সুচরিতা লিভ করতে পারো। থ্যাংক ইউ
ম্যাম, এতদিন পরে আপনাদের সাথে দেখা হলো, প্রচন্ড ভালো লাগছে।
আমাদেরও ভীষণ ভালো লাগছে,
ভীষণ ভালো লাগছে।
সমস্ত ঝামেলা মিটলে কলেজে এসো, তখন সামনাসামনি দেখা হবে।
হ্যাঁ ম্যাম, হ্যাঁ ম্যাম, আসবে।
ঠিক আছে, দেবপর্ণা
সব নরমাল হোক, তারপরে
একদম সমস্ত মিটে যাক তারপর।
একদম ম্যাম, একদম।
লেখাপড়া করছিস, এত স্মার্টলি বলছিস, মানে এটা যে আমাদের কি গর্ব হচ্ছে তোরা ভেবে।
একদম সত্যি তাই।
ম্যাম, বেসটা কিন্তু